use leaf blower to clear insulation off of soffits.
Yeah.
That's going to be fun.
I think he's dreaming there. I mean, it's not like a gun, like pointing a leaf blower at something. That air goes all over the place.
It's going to make a colossal mess at a minimum.
But I hope he takes video.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. I'm joined by Deputy Editor Matt Milham.
Hello.
Design Editor Kiley Jacques.
Hello.
You can email us your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. So I thought we should start off today's show with a little conversation about the hijacking of the podcast from the previous trio of hosts.
I didn't even know that was going to happen, but it was like I saw Brian and Rob. I was not expecting him. Brian had been in for a couple days, but I was like, the boys are back in town. Started playing in my head.
I knew it was happening, but I kept it a secret from
No, you didn't keep it a secret at all, because you told me. I wasn't even supposed to know.
I didn't mean to tell you either.
Yeah.
It just happened.
And then Jeff told me too, but I think they did a pretty good job.
Probably. I haven't listened.
I listened to it this morning.
I listened to half of it. Yeah.
They have a good rapport.
Yeah. No, I used to love
since
listening
they
to
were
the
10 or
podcast when they were
something,
on it, and I haven't listened since I've been on it. I'm not telling everybody else to do that, but I'm probably with them.
It was fun. It was good hearing about their lives, especially, and I enjoyed hearing about Brian's new life in Charleston and Rob's work with Keep Craft Alive. And we see Justin every day, but having him with those two guys was fun.
Yeah,
they
better not do it very
far.
often. That's all I got to say. What's that?
They don't venture too far. They're still around.
Yeah,
can't escape the Taunton orbit.
We just can't trap them in this room every week.
Yeah.
So we heard from a couple folks. Oh, by the way, that podcast was 183A, which kind of breaks the numeral only identification. So if you're looking for that, it's 183A. Mm-hmm. And I would tell you to check it out.
Yeah.
John writes in, hi guys, I just listened to podcast 184 that covered insulating brick homes. I'm a contractor in Newburgh, New York. You know where this is, right?
Yeah, that's my territory.
Yeah. You want to tell folks where that is, just so they know?
It's just south of New Paltz, New York, where I grew up. One exit south. No, it's about an hour north of New York City.
Upper Hudson Valley, right?
Yeah. So, it's considered mid-Hudson Valley.
Okay, my bad.
Yep.
And it's a historic area, and so those folks are limited by the Architectural Review Committee about how they can deal with exterior facade work. In addition to those requirements, many homeowners like the look of brick and want to maintain the brick facade. John says, I think everything put forward from Martin Holliday's GBA article was very informative, although there is one great detail that could be added. When we frame out new walls on the interior of a masonry building, we will pull the framing 1 inch off the brick to allow closed cell foam behind the wood framing and eliminate thermal breaks. Cutting the pocketed beams back is also a must to avoid wicking while engineering a revised load path into the basement. Keep up the great work. Can't wait to hear the next episode. So that's helpful. So he's suggesting if you want to insulate on the inside, and in many cases, at least where he is, that's the only option because you can't mess up the outside.
Yeah.
You got to keep the framing interior 1 inch so you can get foam between the existing masonry and the new stud wall.
But they're also cutting back those beams and taking care of that problem.
Right.
Because that was, I guess, kind of my issue with insulating on the inside was that you're putting those beams at risk.
Because they're cold and they cannot dry.
Right, and they're relocating the load path. Obviously putting some kind of framing inside of something.
I wonder, so do those structural elements that are let into the brick into little pockets or whatever, oftentimes as joists or beams or whatever, is that holding the masonry? Isn't that adding a structural component that's lacking then when you take off those connections?
I don't know that it's actually tying anything together. I don't think that it's really attached to it. I think it's just sitting
in there.
Yeah. So you're just taking some load off of it.
I feel like we talk about brick structure a lot.
Yeah, and don't know enough about it.
Yeah, we need to get to the bottom of some of this.
I think we know.
Right.
So I'm going to ask John if that's indeed a concern, like if there has to be additional structural elements added if you're separating the wood components of the structure and the masonry components of walls.
Chip off little pieces of black holes and stick them on the ledge just to hold it down so the brick doesn't float away.
I had to think about that for a few seconds. What is he talking about?
I still don't know, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to dive there.
We also heard from Ian regarding episode 184. Your Bay Area emailer touched on a topic that I believe plays a major role in keeping craft alive, how we as established tradespeople can train the next generation in the field. I strongly believe that those of us in the field are at a point of leverage for making a difference. I have some advice for apprentices based on my time as an apprentice. And I like this so much, I'm going to read them all, and I'm calling this Ian's 8 Commandments for Apprentices.
I like it too.
Do you want to read one?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Nothing is learned from constant success. Try it, screw it up, think about it, repeat. After 30 or 40 years of this, retire.
I think Justin would appreciate that.
Yeah.
He's told me I need to start cutting into my house more.
That's what I said. It's like you have to make mistakes.
Just rip it apart
Yeah.
and then fix it. Figure it out.
Ask every stupid question you think of, but never ask more questions that you can give considerate thought to the answers. So I guess that means don't ask a question that you're not willing to like take to heart or at least think about, right? Mm-hmm. Show up early, learn how to set the job up. Better yet, ask at the end of the day how to set the job up for tomorrow. I think showing up early is a key to my success and my job. Like every time I show up on time for a photo shoot, I'm late. If I get there ahead of what I think I should be there, it's just in time.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I got to prepare.
You got to get ready. And I don't know what it is about contractors, but they always think they want to be like totally ready for and going when I get there. But I need to be getting ready too.
Yep.
Watch how the experienced people in your trade set up their work. How do they store their tools, set up their workstation, arrange the material, etc. If you cannot figure out why, ask. Most guys would love to tell you.
Pick somebody who
Is organized.
though. I mean, I've seen plenty of guys who've been doing this for a long time
And they're a
whose
disaster.
trucks are a mess.
Yeah.
Clean as you go. That's
Yeah.
my motto.
Yeah.
I do that too.
I think it's really key.
I think it's helps with safety too.
Absolutely.
If you're not tripping over stuff and yeah.
It applies to anything.
I agree. Understand that you will likely be seeing and experiencing things out of sequence. I think what he means is like when you're starting out, you're not going to be there for the whole job. You're going to get snippets of jobs at different places, right?
Yeah.
So until proven otherwise, you are viewed as cheap labor and will get bounced around. Reading, watching videos, and helping someone from the crew on a weekend project will begin to fill in much of the rest. Make peace with the following. If you learn how to build a shed, you know how to build a shed. If you learn how to cut straight and square, read a tape measure and a level, use a square, make accurate marks, and apply right triangle trigonometry, easier than it sounds, he says, then you will possess the foundation needed to build anything.
That's my favorite.
It's great, right?
I mean, it speaks to somebody like me who's a novice. He makes me feel I can do it.
So he's pointing out learn the skills, not how to build a thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Break
Teach
it down.
a man to fish.
Okay, Matt.
I think we need some more cliches, right? The correct answer to how much lumber can you carry is 2 more sticks than the boss. This is my favorite. I've heard something similar to like, what's the best way to coil an extension cord? And the only adequate answer I've ever heard is whatever the way the boss wants you to.
There's a lot of debate around that.
Oh, you wouldn't believe.
I can't
And
believe
everyone
it.
thinks that their way is the right way and everyone else is an idiot. Except my way is the right way.
Never roll it up.
What? How?
Just never coil it. Just leave it long.
Oh, that would drive me insane.
Yeah.
Never put it away.
Oh my gosh. Finally, he adds, if an employer or crew is not giving you what you need to learn, find one that will. It is okay to move around when you are learning this business, in my humble opinion. Well, thanks, Ian. Ian is a lead carpenter and estimator for Hudson Valley Preservation. And he knows what he's doing.
We should make a blog post out of that.
Out of
Just a great little.
Ian's eight commandments for
Yeah.
apprentices, I think you're
We
totally
need to
right.
post that somewhere.
It'll definitely be on the podcast page right away. Here we go. So things have been very busy around the McHomestead. Both my wife and my son have been helping me on our bedroom project. I feel like it's finally like on a path to not rapid completion, but some completion at some point. And last week was my son's included my son's last day of school. So Friday, I took the day off and we went to the home center and we
Got
rented
vacation
this.
started.
So I sprung
Summer.
this on him the night before. He said, "What are we going to do, Daddy?" And I said, "Well, son, I'm really hoping you're with me on going to the home center and getting a sander and sanding our floor." And he's like, "Well, I don't think that's what most kids would want to do on their first day of summer vacation, but I'm game." He's a good boy. So
He is a good boy.
He's there's a photo of him donning his half mask, respirator, hearing protection, where he has his iTunes or iPhone buds in his ears, and
He's listening
he's
to a
sanding
podcast about how to sand.
He's sanding the floor with a multi-disc sander. So I had some anxiety about using this machine. I think I told you.
Yeah.
And you've used it before.
Yeah, it's real easy.
It's
real
easy.
hard to screw up.
It's really hard to screw up.
It's so slow.
Admittedly, the room is very small. It's we were literally sanding about 100 square feet, so that's tiny. But that took about 3 hours. So if you guys extrapolate that, who are listening, you can tell pretty much how long it's going to take to sand a floor. And my floor was not. It's rustic, let's say, right? It's meant to have a kind of loft, rustic quality. The color's inconsistent and stuff. So if you want a perfect floor, it's going to take longer, I'm sure.
What grit did you start at, and what did you end at?
36 was the first, and I went to 100, and I bought every grit in between that they had. So I think it went 36 to 60 to 80 to 100. So at 4 grits. I noticed that the higher grits lasted a lot longer than the early super coarse grits. I think getting off the tar residue and stuff wore out those discs, and Liam and I both ran over one of the heating registers, which sticks up slightly above the floor plane, so it's this like razor sharp sheet metal, and that immediately destroyed a disc or two. So,
And you said something about the particulates from the fine were much more bothersome.
For whatever reason, and maybe there's a chemist, I don't know, industrial hygienist out there who can answer this question, but the coarser grits that put a lot less particulates in the matter than the fine grit, which was like very dusty and annoying.
And the vacuum on the thing didn't work.
Not at all. It was terrible.
Do you think that had anything to do with the
dust?
Well, the fact that somebody had gone and cut part of the skirt off of the thing.
Possibly. Yeah, so one of the qualities of this machine is there's like this kind of bristly skirt around the bottom, which I think is meant to aid in dust collection. But what someone had done previously is cut a section at the very front of it so you could get right up to a wall, which I welcomed. It was awesome. I would totally sacrifice the dust collection for that modification. And that's not all. So like I built the biggest cabinet of my entire life on Saturday. So this is our wardrobe cabinet. Because we have a window where I would want to put a reach-in closet, right? I decided to make the super wide wardrobe cabinet because I can leave the wall there, and this thing is just going to stick out from the wall. And it's 5 feet wide, 7 feet tall, and 2 feet deep. And it's about all I can manage to move.
Yeah. And you haven't figured out yet if it's actually you're gonna be able to stand it up in that space or not.
I don't really know if I'm gonna. I mean, I could do some geometry, I suppose, to figure it out,
Just
right?
pull a diagonal.
Yeah.
See if it'll stand up.
If I have to, I can take it apart. It's all put together with pocket screws.
Yeah.
And arguably that's going to be necessary just to physically move it. Unless you guys feel like coming over to move a...
I don't know. Your son's off of school. Get Liam to help you.
Yeah, he will.
Getting the built-in into my closet, I lucked into that because I did not measure. And then I was like, oh my gosh, like I had to lift it above the window trim. And like I just barely squeaked it in there.
It's amazing how heavy plywood gets when you start combining multiple sheets into a project, right? It is stupid.
I learned how to carry a piece of plywood recently.
Yeah.
It was
There's definitely a
stupid heavy.
technique,
Use your
right?
Yeah,
hands,
there
right?
was a technique, yeah.
Were you able to pick it up from the ground?
You got to be able to squat.
Yeah. That's the hard
That's
part.
the thing.
I like once I get it up, it's better, but getting it off the ground is
Yeah.
tough because you're using all your back.
Yeah, it's heavy.
It's heavy.
And not realize quite how heavy.
You sent me a great story this morning, and
Yeah.
and I was immediately interested because it takes place in Pittsburgh,
Right.
my hometown, and
Part of what made me think of you. Yeah, there's a great Facebook page, Our Old House. I see all kinds of neat things on.
tell us about
was a
this
story.
story you sent me, which appeared in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette.
Yeah, so this guy has been working on the same house for 46 years. And yeah, it's a
labor of love.
It's a labor of love. He got. I love the fact that Pittsburgh has a renovation inspiration contest, and he won the award for 2019.
And this house is what, 1850?
1835.
Wow.
Red brick
and
with
it's all brick.
2-story Victorian porch. Yep.
And he figures he spent, what, 11,000 hours working on it?
I love the fact he started a diary or a journal of some kind in 1972.
When he bought it with his wife, Carol.
Every project that he works on, he documents in this journal, which I would love to get a look at. But yeah, good for him, right? He said that the hardest project that he undertook was repairing the porch, rebuilding the porch, essentially.
So this is like a 2-story brick colonial, and at some point, probably in the latter part of the 19th century or the early part of the 20th century, someone added a double-decker porch on the front.
Right.
And it's easily the home's coolest feature, I would say.
Yeah.
It's pretty ornamental.
I was going to say, it sounds like it was built pre-Victorian, the majority of the structure.
Right, but the porch itself,
I would say,
is Victorian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The house is gorgeous.
Yeah.
And he has not screwed it up at all.
Right. Yeah.
And it just goes to show that if you have enough time, you can do anything.
Actually, to Ian's point, I love this quote. He quoted his own dad, the guy that worked on the house. If someone else can do it, so can you. I might not do it right the first time, but I can do it. I like that.
Me too. Because, like, even pros, don't do it right the first time often, right? And you get stuff fixed up.
Yep.
I like there was a little history in the article, and it said that the clay for the bricks came from the site, and
Fired
it
on
was
site.
originally built by Irish immigrants, right?
I don't remember that part.
They bought like 100 acres for $700 or something.
Yeah,
and
yeah. That's right.
Man. Good old days.
What do you have to share? What have you been working on?
Well, I've been working on that shed a little bit. I finally got the doors on. Started glazing the windows.
So tell me about the windows and doors. I almost said fenestration, but it's a word I really dislike.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I can't imagine you using that word, Patrick.
The one solid door, the sort of barn style or whatever shed style door, that was I actually bought from a guy who was a fine home building author, I think back in the 90s.
No way.
Which I only found out by talking to him when I was buying the door.
So tell us
cool.
about the door. It's a board and batten thing?
It's just, it's not even board and batten. It's just boards, and like there's like a Z pattern of
Yeah. I have one of those in my closet.
Yeah,
It's tongue and groove boards stuck together with
yeah,
wood on the back to hold it together.
yeah, and the bottom of it's really punky. The thing is not square, so it's like there's some weird gaps.
When you say punky, you don't mean rotting, though, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
really?
Yeah, the bottom of it's
That's
in
what
pretty
you
rough
went
shape. Well, it was
Ooh,
cheap.
this one's rotting on the bottom.
Well, really, my fiance is the one who
I love it
really
when
fell in love
when
with the
she's
door.
catty. That's hilarious.
Yeah. She's the one who fell in love with it. She thought it was great. I was
Yeah,
like, yeah,
a
we can
woman's
work with
touch.
it. It's fine. It's a shed.
Yeah.
Who really cares? But, and we painted it this bright green.
It is the most
It's
eye-popping
fabulous.
green I've ever seen.
I love it.
And the other thing was...
Is it called like June bug or something?
I can't remember what it's called.
Is that good, right?
That's good.
Yeah, squished lightning bug. And the other thing was from the Restore. It's a semi-broken, I think, French door.
It's a 15 light,
Yeah.
all glass door.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, just to let some light in.
And what's wrong with that?
I think...
I love that all these things have something wrong with it.
Yeah, well, I think they I think the hole saw they used to drill for the lock set was too big. And there's like maybe 3/4 of an inch between the lock set and the edge of the door.
Yep.
And it's just cracked there.
Okay.
And I'm like, it's for a shed. I don't care. It was $20, including...
And it looks fantastic.
It
Yeah,
looks fine.
You would never know.
And that's the seedling, right? That's your potting shed. So the glass is going to help get some light in there for the plants.
Yeah.
Cool.
And
Are you
those
gonna
other
just-
windows were like $15 a piece at another reclaimed place.
And did you make the frames, or are those just sash set in the framing?
Those are just sashes, and the trim is just basically covering part of the opening and holding those from falling out. And then they're just kind of like not even tacked on the inside. There's going to be dowels that basically allow you to tip it back.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So tell me, how many dollars do you invested in the windows and doors for this project?
What was it? 20, 40, about $85.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good for you, Matt.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What are you going to do with the trim in terms of color?
I'm
or
just
stain?
going to leave it
You're
like
just gonna
that.
stain it.
Yeah.
Or clear stain.
I did
Just clear
put
coat.
a couple coats of poly around that one window. I'll probably do the same around the rest of the
Yeah.
stuff. But
What's that a Japanese siding tradition.
Shoshugiban.
So that's what it looks like. That's what it
So
looks
that's
like
what it looks like to me.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
like you burned all your siding.
Yeah.
Right.
It looks great.
Was that intentional? Did you want that look?
I don't know that I wanted that particular look, but
Yeah.
I did want it to kind of
Blend in.
disappear.
Yeah.
So
into
that's why you put the
landscape.
June bug green on the
Yeah.
Well,
sash.
that's on the side that we see.
Okay.
Nobody else will see that. So
From the road.
yeah, from the road, you can't really tell.
Yeah.
Looks great, man.
Yeah.
But the next thing is
Okay.
a gazebo, and it's on a very sloped piece of my property that is very difficult to mow. So I just want to put something there
Instead of grass.
instead of grass. So I just don't know what the best solution is for like footings and stuff like that. How would you build it?
I would build concrete piers with varying length posts.
And just attach them on top, or would you sink them into the concrete?
No, I would definitely not sink them into the concrete. I think that's very bad practice.
Yeah.
Especially with modern pressure-treated preservatives.
Yeah.
That's just an invitation to rot. And I would use post bases so the post bottoms are elevated. And I would also cut the top side, not the bottom side, so it's got the preservative, more of it. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Would this be a scenario for those pin piers that we talked about a few shows back?
I don't know.
He's not going to pay for that.
Are those super spendy?
They're more than bags of concrete.
Yeah, I was just going to rent like a post hole auger and go out there and poke some holes because it's going to be. I don't think I'm going to be able to draw up plans ahead of time because there are so many roots around this area because it's pretty
See?
much underneath a tree whose roots are going all over the place.
Why
So
that pin pier
the
might
worry is you're not going to be able to put the piers where you draw them.
Right. So I'm going to have to figure out where I can put those first and then draw plans based on where those are.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So does it have to be like a traditional hexagonal
No.
gazebo? It could be any shape.
Nope. I'm thinking more like most people probably aren't familiar with Mohonk Mountain House. In
Oh, contraire.
I don't know why you would say that.
yeah, but they have like these really cool cedar gazebos all over the place, and I mean some of these are almost like hanging off of cliff faces. And,
Cool.
So it's going to be something more in that aesthetic, I think.
Neat.
Your
Yeah.
house is getting funky.
Yep.
I wouldn't have paid you for funky.
That's what Justin said.
Yeah.
I know Matt.
Yeah.
He's got some funk.
He grew up in New Paltz, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a mohawk for years.
Did you?
Yeah.
Wow. Was it like a weird color and stuff?
Oh yeah, all different kinds of colors. Then I joined the army. They knocked all that out of me. I had a mohawk for like about 2 hours in the army, and one of my drill sergeants made me cut it off.
I bet he
It's
had
good
some
you can express
I bet he
yourself
had some
again.
like
Yeah.
very supportive comments relating to your mohawk also. You're not saying. Let's take some questions here. So Aaron from North Dakota writes, "Great show. I really enjoy listening in the car. Everything here in North Dakota is so spread out, I can easily get through the episodes." We live in the small town of Max, North Dakota. We recently purchased a 2-story home built in the early 80s. Our home inspection revealed there's no furnace installed.
There
Oh my
is a
gosh.
furnace installed.
Our home inspection revealed there's a furnace installed and an air conditioning condenser outside, but we have no ducting throughout the house. The furnace only circulates cold air. We're not even connected to natural gas. Okay, now someone has got to explain to me what the heck is going on with this. My guess is they ran out of money, and that instead of buying the ductwork and paying someone to put the thing all together, they just bought some resistance heaters and stuck it in the house, right?
I'm wondering if they didn't have like propane tanks at one time, and that this isn't a propane furnace, and they just, the joist bays themselves were serving as sort of the ducts.
Yeah. Well, that's a good suggestion.
Because that's not that uncommon. My parents have that in their.
It used to be very accepted practice, right? Especially for return air. It would be they use the joist cavities to bring the air back to the furnace. I don't know why that was okay with return air and not okay with supply air.
Yeah.
It's kind of baffling.
Yeah.
We have plans on getting gas service and fixing the ducting. Currently, the air is blowing directly into the floor joists in between the first and second floor. What a mess. This is on my DIY to-do list. Any suggestions would be appreciated. Well, I'd say get some ductwork, and your furnace is going to work a lot better, and some gas would help too. And make sure that, as Matt suggests, make sure it's not been converted to propane before you hook up the gas, because they operate at very different volumes and pressures. And it would be bad to put gas to a propane converted furnace.
Yeah. Would it even burn?
I don't know.
Yeah. I
It
don't know
seems
either.
dangerous.
Yeah.
Because propane much higher pressures. It's like 10 psi instead of a half psi.
Right.
So I don't know. It might not work.
Yeah. Just be blowing gas through the house.
So I would say get some ductwork, and there's a great article on GBA described appropriately enough the fundamentals of rigid duct design, and it tells you all the things you need to know to get a good design. And this is the kind of thing that you probably should hire an expert. I would suggest a third party, not your HVAC installer. Those guys do things often that is not best practice, especially if you're in a rural area where you're not going to have a lot of contractors to choose from. You're going to have to take who's ever willing to drive to wherever you are in Max. And it's quite possible to get someone online to do a duct design and a manual J calculation. Matt, what's the duct design component of manual J? Is it manual D?
I don't remember
Manual
all that
E.
stuff. Yeah.
So there's a
bunch of different-
special formula and way to get ducts that work, which
Yeah.
is unusual. And you're also going to have to seal it. And we'll get a little more into sealing ducts with a future question later on in the show. How do you think this happened, Kiley?
You're asking the wrong girl. But he did make mention of the fact that he has some steel siding that he wants to paint.
Yeah. So what do you think of
Painting
this?
steel siding. I don't know. I don't.
We have
I've
a
not
photograph of
known
the house. And
anybody who's done that.
he says that it's nice steel siding. There are no issues with it, except my wife hates the color, which is reason enough to change it, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think they're going to change the color of their house too?
Yeah. I don't
I think
it's...
you do the whole kit and
When you
caboodle.
say steel siding, he's talking about
The
the
lap
entire
siding.
house?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought he was talking about those little hanging down. I don't know what those are.
Those might be steel too, but my guess is that's wood. But Kiley is referring to a kind of skirting detail
Skirting,
on the
okay,
deck,
yeah.
right? On the deck.
I've never seen that before. Have you?
Never.
Yeah. That's what I thought
It's a
was
good looking
steel.
house. It looks very appropriate to the area, right?
Yeah.
And you did some digging into painting steel siding.
Well, into metal siding, period.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that there's a huge difference between, painting over like aluminum or steel.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
If you've got a coating or whatever that's, been factory applied.
That the process is the same.
I would think so, but I don't really know. I don't know enough about
What
this.
kind of
I
paint
probably
was
shouldn't talk about it at all.
What they suggest for
Well,
paint?
somebody had written in with a question similar to this years ago. This is back in the 90s.
To Fine Homebuilding.
To Fine Homebuilding.
Okay.
And Brian J. Doherty, a painting contractor in Richmond, Virginia, said basically clean it real good first. He uses pressure washer with TSP.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've got any mold or mildew, he also adds a little bit of bleach to that.
Sure.
And sprays it down real good and then rinses it with clean water. One thing, you got to definitely get all the detergent off
Or it
before it
won't
dries
stick.
on there.
Yeah.
But you want to make sure that's real clean. And then he just uses... he skips primer. He goes right to paint.
That's been the recommendation for aluminum siding.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to use an acrylic latex. And because it's
It's
elastic
more flexible.
and it sticks really well,
Yeah, and not oil.
not oil.
Yeah, because it's not as flexible. And he said that if you do have a lot of chalking on the siding, even after you've cleaned it, because apparently that's a thing, he adds some emulsif bond to the first coat of paint to help it stick.
I wonder if that's a bigger problem with the old aluminum. That's definitely something I've had to deal with.
Yeah,
It's this white powdery stuff.
Yeah.
And you definitely got to remove that or it won't stick.
yeah.
What color would you paint this house?
Am I wrong to think that steel siding is unusual?
No. I think you're spot on with that.
Okay, because I've heard of aluminum siding, but I have not come across steel siding.
Not like that. I mean, I think more and more you see steel siding, but like
It's a different
panels,
look.
It's a completely different look. Like people use
Yeah,
corrugated.
because I would have
or
guessed
like,
that was vinyl from a distance.
It
right?
looks like
Yeah.
vinyl or aluminum.
Yeah.
I don't know what makes a product take off or not. Like steel siding would seem to me intuitively to be a problem with corrosion, but I mean coatings are so good now, and like metal roofing lasts for a century. So
Yeah.
why not steel siding?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Is it galvanized first and then painted? I know nothing about it.
Yeah. Sounds like it would be expensive.
Yeah, and why not vinyl? Because it's the same look and
It has the
it's
same look,
like
yeah.
it's ubiquitous.
Yeah. But we
But
don't
it sounds
even know what
doable.
era.
It sounds like he's.
Yeah, I think
He
there's
can
no
do
problem
this,
with that.
yeah.
And I would talk to somebody at a good paint store.
Yeah.
And I think there is no need to prime it, but there might be some exceptions with regard to special conditions that would require a primer, mold, or stains or whatever.
Yeah, I will say this. When I was looking up stuff on this, it says to put all this stuff. He puts all these detergents, the TSP, the bleach, in the pressure washer, in the detergent tank. And then I looked at the manual for my pressure washer.
Don't do that.
It says, not to use household chemicals, bleach, and stuff like that in the thing. So rent. Just rent the thing. Make it somebody else's problem.
Terrible.
I like that
don't
suggestion.
ruin your own sprayer.
So to Matt's concern is that these cleaning products are corrosive, and the pump in the pressure washer is aluminum, and it's easily corroded. So that's the problem, especially if you leave the stuff in there.
Yeah.
So maybe you spray it on with a backpack sprayer first, and then get your pressure washer out. No.
Yep. That would work fine. They're also described as downstream injection systems for a pressure washer, which puts the soap in like at the nozzle instead of in at the pump.
Right.
And those are better for your pressure washer.
Yeah.
That's going to be expensive, though.
Yeah.
Can hand wash it with a magic eraser.
Yeah. You can do that too. You can do it by hand.
Sure.
Like if you want to go out there with your mixer.
Scrub
and
brush?
Scrub brush
Or
or a
your
sponge.
eraser?
Yeah.
I wonder if the eraser residue would prevent adhesion potentially.
You just rinse it off.
Rinse it off?
afterwards. Yeah.
Troy from Oregon writes in, "Hey, FHB podcast team. I currently have a small rooftop deck over living space, 7 by 10, that is okay, but will eventually need replacing sometime soon. The current surface is a felt membrane of some sort over plywood. We currently stay off of it since I assume the felt isn't made for foot traffic, and it feels a bit spongy when I walk on it. I'm fairly sure I have a rotted mess under there that will need to come out. I inspected the underside when I remodeled the kitchen below, and the joists and base layer of plywood were both sound and dry, but water-stained in spots. I want to install a bulletproof solution that will last a long time. The house is on the Oregon coast, where we get about 90 inches of rain a year and about 15 minutes of sun. We also get a lot of corrosion from salt spray. My alternatives are a membrane of some sort with a floating deck or a waterproof substrate and tile. Maybe there's an alternative I haven't thought of. Since it's a small area and the cost impact of a failure is high, I'm not concerned about the budget for it. I'm looking for best practice. Wood deck and membrane, tile, lots of blue tarps. What all do you think? I've been a listener since episode 1. It's a great show. Thanks for the effort you put into it." Well, thank you, Troy. I don't think the blue tarps. I think we can single that out.
I don't know.
If you go the blue tarp route, put it up above.
Yeah.
Right?
Maybe you can get some FEMA money, though. Put some blue tarps on there. Call up FEMA. Hey, can I get some of that money?
I don't know what to say here. Well, you go first.
Yeah. Well, the picture that's up on the screen behind you is of a project that I saw up in Portland. I wasn't shooting this for an article or anything. I was just looking around to see. Yeah, I was in the area. So I talked to a bunch of builders. And these guys happen to be building sort of what this guy's talking about. They already had this is a new build. But they had a sloped roof over living space that they were putting a deck on. And they put down EPDM. And then they had sort of like floating sleepers above it,
and they're
they had
tapered.
Yeah, so that part was flat, but the deck below it was sloped out so that it would.
And the deck
drain.
boards are spaced accordingly to allow the water to get down to the membrane below to drain off the roof.
Right, which seemed great, except that they did say that it was kind of they had to figure out a lot. About like getting that fastened without puncturing the membrane.
This is a hard thing to get right.
Yeah.
I mean, inevitably roofs leak, and when you have a deck on top and living space below. That's a problem.
Yeah. But it was this
It's
is what
the
the
design.
architect drew up, and they had to figure out a solution.
And when you have views, this makes perfect sense, right? Why not get up higher so you can see what there is to see and enjoy it?
Yep.
So I get the appeal. It's a hard thing to get right. What do you think about this idea from a design perspective?
I love it for the reasons that you just described. Yeah. If it's like you want to get up high, it's often what you're going to have to do, right? But I didn't realize that it had all these special considerations.
Oh man, it's a pain.
Crow's nest deck, right?
Yeah.
I love that.
And in this area, like if you've ever been to Portland, Maine, it's kind of a hilly city.
Right.
Aren't we talking Portland, Oregon?
No, he may be, but this
okay.
particular
My
picture
bad.
is from
Right.
Portland,
Oh,
Maine.
what a coincidence, huh?
And yeah, so there are people building, and I think there's a moratorium on it now, but people were building taller and taller houses to try
get
to
water
get
views.
Oh, right.
to get water views, and they just,
block
it was
their neighbors' water
block
views.
their neighbors' water views. I mean, it was like it's insane.
So
But,
that type of deck popular there?
I don't know if that kind of deck popular, but I imagine it is.
I think any place I've been coastal has lots of rooftop decks.
Yeah.
So he also, this is the way I'm familiar with, right? You get a membrane roof, you build a deck on top.
What does the slope have to be?
So quarter inch
depend?
per foot is preferred, and 1/8 inch per foot minimum. And those are standards specified by the roofing manufacturer. They have those rules. And this is something for a commercial roofer if you want to do the membrane, because residential roofers don't work with membranes. Commercial roofers do it every day. And commercial buildings can't leak. I think I've said it before. There's like millions of dollars in inventory in a box store. So, right, it has to work. And these roofs are all done so that warranties can be honored, because like building tenants and building owners can't afford to replace the tenant's stuff.
Right.
So it's somebody who you really want to know what they're doing.
So oftentimes I get the feeling that you're suggesting that people should get a commercial roofer to do their residential roof. Am I
Well,
wrong
if you
about that?
can, for odd conditions, yeah. I mean, because like
Are there such people?
Well, I know Diami
They do
does
just side jobs?
Diami of Roof Services on Long Island. They do residential roofs, and it's not inexpensive. But like, you can't mess this up. So
Right.
spend the money once or spend it multiple times.
Yeah. And if you wanted to go the tile route, Schluter does have exterior systems, but I don't even think they will let just like the average guy, the average builder on the street do it. Like,
really?
Yeah, I think they want you to contact either their technical services or customer service or something like that.
And they'll draw an assembly, presumably.
Well, they got to come out and inspect the job first, maybe, or they do something basically to verify that their
This'll
systems
work.
are going to work with what you've got, and then I think they inspect it along the process to make sure that everything's right in order to basically give you a warranty. They won't warrant it if you just like pick up some Curdy membrane and
Right.
stick it down.
Yeah, that could go horribly wrong.
Yeah.
So I mean, in essence, this situation is a big shower floor, right? You're treating the roof system as a shower, right? It's going to be waterproof.
Yep.
And you use their waterproofing membranes to do that. Interestingly, I was reminded of a story that I didn't work on specifically, but that was in a magazine I used to work for, and in parts of coastal New Jersey, fiberglass rooftop decks are the norm. And so you get this person who's an expert in doing fiberglass work, and they come in and make a watertight deck out of fiberglass on site. And there's some appealing elements to that. It's a certain look. It might not be for everybody, but I mean, it's like now you've built a boat on your roof.
Right.
And boats are pretty
Shower,
watertight.
boat,
Yeah.
whatever.
And that's what I think they said in the article. Like, this is a thing because
There's
a
a
lot
boat
of boats
industry.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I
that
mean, I
makes
think
sense.
if you're on the Pacific coast, you might be
Same,
able to
right?
find the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if that's appealing to you, I would explore someone who is.
Of those
I would
three,
want someone who's done that before, and not just your boat guy to come
Right.
out and.
You can build a boat. You can build a deck. Add that, number 9.
what do you think would be most cost effective of those three options?
I think the membrane is
Yeah.
the way to go.
Although he
Cost
said
effective.
he just wants it to be well done.
Yeah.
Cost wasn't so much a factor. But
I think tile outside is kind of slippery, especially on a rooftop deck, right? And like people partying up there,
Yeah, if
slipping.
there's going to be snow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the other problem with this. Portland, Oregon, it's not a concern, but places where you have snow and ice damming and ice and like, that seems like that's a problem too. Like if ice builds up under there, it's going to create a dam. The water's not going to be able to drain.
Right. It's going to fill up to the top of the
And it's
the
going to
deck
go to
boards.
the nearest
Yeah.
roof transition and start ooching back there.
Yep.
If any of you listening have a system that you use for this particular problem, I would love to hear about it.
Yeah.
Ideas, letter or send an email, give me a call, whatever. This is a story we've been looking at for the magazine for a long time, and it's tough to find the right situation and right contractor with the right timing. It's all these things have to come into play. Dave from Kalamazoo, Michigan. Hi, FHB. My wife and I have plans to build a home in the next year or two, so I'd love to listen to your podcast and get ideas on the best way and products to use when building a house. I get all kinds of great ideas from you, your guests, and other listeners. One of the ideas I had for our next house was a waterproof mechanical room. I love this guy already.
I know, me too.
The goal would be that a water leak or spray of any device in this room would be contained and never had the chance to damage any wood products.
Why doesn't this exist already?
I know. It would be located on the basement, so the floor would be concrete with a slight slope to the drain. The walls would be covered with 4x8 plastic wall panels, and the wall's base plate, I think he means the sill.
The sill, yeah.
Would be elevated on a concrete berm. The one detail I have is how I should add a 2 to 4 inch concrete berm. I would assume this would have to be a small second concrete pour after the flat work is done. I would probably use some rebar to dowel the 2 separate pours together. How would I waterproof the joint between the 2 pours? Would an epoxy floor coating on the horizontal surface and up the berm be resilient enough to remain watertight after any natural movements? Wow, this is a good question. This guy is planning ahead for the inevitable failure of plumbing in Kalamazoo, Michigan, or it's going to be a heating failure that leads to ruptured pipes, right?
Yeah.
Or a natural disaster.
Is there any reason you couldn't pour that monolithically?
I don't know.
I mean, I can't. I imagine it might be a little bit of a butt pain, but
It's going to be a weird formwork, right?
yeah,
Why not just use like solid block or
yeah,
masonry, right? You just like build up a little stem wall on top of the concrete slab.
yeah,
And doweling it, that seems a little excessive.
yeah. I don't know. I think the whole idea is a little excessive, personally.
I wasn't going to say that right away, but I was kind of getting there.
I mean, there's
I
like
don't know. I think it makes good sense.
so
But it's
many-
already a concrete floor.
yeah, so many different plumbing companies already make these like automatic shut-off
That's
things.
what I went to.
Yeah, and I mean, I saw
that,
one
yeah.
out at IBS like 2 years ago.
We have a photograph of that one, Jeff, up here. It's Moen's.
Yeah, Moen
Flow.
has one, but I saw the Uponor Fin, and I think now they have the Fin Plus. And it does basically exactly what this guy wants it to do. It detects, as soon as it detects a leak, it shuts the entire system down.
And it tells you on your phone that your water is turned off.
Yeah.
And that your hot tub might not be full when you get home because the water shut off because your pipe burst.
Yeah. And I mean, that's not going to just take care of your mechanical room. That's going to take care of your entire house, because the mechanical room isn't the only place where you're
pipes.
potentially going to get a leak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought
What
if you-
about flooding? I mean, where does he live? Kalamazoo. I mean, it's not just about your water pipes bursting, right?
Is he
What
worried about water getting into the mechanical
yeah,
room?
that's what I was
I
thinking.
don't
That's
think
what
2
I
to 4
pictured.
inches is going to do it.
Yeah, right?
You need to get a
No.
sump pump.
And yeah.
All
And
right.
it's like there's going to be equipment in there that's going to get wet if there's water pouring in the room, right?
Yeah.
So that's still another problem that you're not dealing with.
Right.
I think if you really want to pursue this, just treat it like a tile shower.
Yeah.
Shielding membrane on the floor drain, tile. Have at it.
Yeah.
You
Use
could
their-
shower in there if you want later.
Yeah, use their curbs or build a curb.
Yeah.
You can just use a wood curb and then put the membrane right over it.
So when I saw this question, I was immediately recalled the first product that you were talking about that shuts off the water, which was Water Cop, and that product still exists. And it's an electronic valve that gets a signal from these little senders, right? I think the early versions, just the water completed the circuit for a DC motor that then shut the valve and turned off the water supply to the whole house.
Yeah.
So I think I would do that instead. I think
Well,
that
there's got to be a reason why this guy wants to build it.
Because he's an engineer, probably.
I think there's some engineering involved.
Yeah. I don't think it's a bad idea, but I
don't
think
either.
he's only protecting that one. He's protecting the rest of the house sort of from that one room and neglecting all the other stuff that can go wrong.
Yeah. So in our first home, we had a laundry area on the first floor on a hardwood floor in our half bath behind some doors, right? And I spent a ton of money on the flood saver washing machine enclosure, which, like, for those of you who aren't familiar, it's like a plastic pan that goes on the wall and on the floor, and you hook it up to a shower drain goes in the bottom, and you hook that up to your waistline. And the theory is that if your washing machine ever overflows or the hose ruptures, it goes into this drain and nothing happens. Well, like, of course, none of these things ever happened.
So you
Right.
don't know.
So, and then I found out when I wanted a bigger front-loading washer, it wouldn't fit in this plastic pan, and it's like, how often does this happen? And It happens a lot. The insurance industry will tell you, but the solution is to replace your washing machine hoses every few years, not to spend thousands of dollars to do all this extra plumbing to deal with the leak that shouldn't happen anyway.
Right.
And front-loading washers don't overflow because it's closed up.
Yeah.
So that was my live and learn. And there are also these valves for washing machine hoses too, that if they detect water on the floor, they shut off the washing machine. And some of them shut off every time you are done with the washing machine. They're energized when you turn on the washer. The valve opens and allows water into the hoses. Yep. And that's kind of an aside, but it's my story of like over preparing for like flooding that never happens.
Yeah.
Oh boy, this is another good one.
Another Oregon.
Yeah. Paul. He's in Bend, Oregon, which is the place I might live if I could live anywhere.
See you there.
Yeah, have you been?
I know it. I haven't been. I have family there. It's on my list, but I already know I love it.
Yeah. So the thing about Bend, it's got a pretty nice climate and huge mountains, and it's pretty dry compared to like the
other parts of
Oregon, which are very wet and would be overwhelming for me. Paul was purchasing a 2,600 square foot 2-story home in Bend, Oregon, with a natural gas furnace in the attic. I know, he says, exclamation point. But it's still happening. I've read what I can. The house is 9 years old and has both heat and air conditioning and flex duct everywhere that looks unsealed. At least there was no mastic on the one flex duct that wasn't attached. There looks to be about R35 insulation in the attic. Crawl space is vented with moisture barrier and insulation under the first floor. Paul might be another engineer. I've created a 15 or so point plan on what I'm going to do to improve the situation, but would love to get some confirmation/advice before I start working away. Right now, there's a combination of blown-in fiberglass and bats in different areas of the attic. The ducts are located in the blown-in section. The bats area is over a 2-story living room, so there are no registers or ductwork there. There's some smaller ducts run on the floor of the attic with just a couple of inches of insulation on top, and some are attached to the attic ceiling with straps. The return duct, for one, is attached to the ceiling. I've read that since Bend, Oregon is a low humidity area, the ducts can run on top of the existing insulation and there won't be a condensation problem. I can cover them with more blown-in insulation. As of now, that's my plan. I'm going to use a lot of blown-in insulation on top of them, as long as I'm confident I'm not going to block the airflow. He's going to make 2 more points here, and then we'll get to what's going on here. I'm not sure how much heat this 80% furnace is releasing into the attic, but I'd even consider a high-efficiency furnace if somehow that makes sense from a functionality and efficiency versus cost number. Lastly, I think it's interesting that the HVAC industry talks about how fast you'll recoup your investment via energy savings and ignores that the money not spent on a new furnace will remain invested with Warren Buffett.
A shares or B shares?
It's really harder to break even with money spent than the industry makes it look. What a great point. Mm-hmm. That's something that no one ever talks about. Like, oh yeah, this is going to save you money, except it's not going to save you as much money as not spending the money in the first place.
Right.
What do you think about all this?
Well, should he insulate the ductwork with spray foam before he buries it?
I'd say we need to seal the duct somewhere, somehow. Foam is a great way. It's kind of expensive. You can do it yourself with those 2-part kits, but those are an environmental disaster. Okay. There's not really a good idea on how to dispose of them properly. So I tell people to stay away from those because I've used them and I think they're toxic. Okay. But sealing ducts is really important. What's the problem here in the first place? Why does this gentleman writing to us about...
Shouldn't have ductwork in the attic.
You shouldn't have ductwork in the attic, but everyone does it.
Yeah. And he's talking about possibly replacing the furnace with a more efficient thing.
So should he reroute the ductwork?
Yeah, why not
I'd
put
say
it somewhere
fix
else?
the ductwork first. And if you can swing the expense, move the air handler into the living space. Mm-hmm. If you can really seal the ductwork and move the air handler into the living space, you're going to go a long way to improving the efficiency of this house. According to, this comes from GBA, according to building scientist Joe Steebrook, the energy penalty associated with attic ducts is often in the range of 30%. That is, 30% of the home's heating and cooling energy is lost to the attic. Mm-hmm. That is insane. So why do it? If you can move,
What if you can't move?
well,
What's
let's
the
say
problem?
two important steps: carefully air sealing all of the duct seams and moving the air handler into the home's conditioned space. The energy penalty can be cut from 30 to 10%. So 10%, not bad. 30, that's a killer.
30 on an 80% efficient. I mean,
So that means you're getting like 50% of your
yeah,
dollars.
you're bringing it down to like, yeah, I think if you did a
my
percentage,
math
it's like
I can't just
66% or something
add
like that.
those things together.
Yeah.
That's Patrick math.
30% of 80% is like 24, I think. I don't know.
I love
don't know
your
how you would do the
dazzling
math.
math.
I don't know how you would do the math.
It's a
for
big
that
hit,
exactly, though.
right?
It's a big hit.
You're spending lots of money.
Yeah.
And so it would make no sense to replace the furnace with a new one until you do these air sealing measures, right? Because if you can reduce the load by 20%, you're talking about 20% smaller equipment, right? And that's going to be less expensive, and it's going to save you money every month. What people forget is even in heating season, a big part of your energy bill is the blower and your air handler, right? So you're spending money every season, whether it's heating or cooling.
So where are you sticking this thing? If you're putting a new one in, can you put it in the crawl space?
If they're going to change where the thermal envelope is, if they're going to leave the thermal barrier at the floor, no.
No, right. But I mean, like, yeah, while he's down there, I mean, just insulate the walls, put the furnace down there, make the crawl space part of the conditioned space. You're supposed to.
I
do
forget,
that
was this a
anyway.
2-story house? Let me look. It was in here.
Yeah, 2-story living.
So that's a problem, right? So I don't know if that's going to work, but you could totally move the air handler into a closet. There are some space considerations with that. Both you're going to lose closet space, and the furnace needs a certain amount of space around it based on the manufacturer's recommendations.
Yeah.
If you can move it into a space that you got a room you don't use a lot, and you can like build a room in there, hide it.
I feel like a dog addict. What is that? Where you can bring your furnace down into conditioned space, but you create a space for it. What's that called?
I don't know, but you're talking like making a little conditioned room up in the attic to put the air handler in.
Yeah, I guess that's it.
Yeah, so people have done that successfully. We've had letters to the magazine of people who have done that, and they make what amounts to a big coffin out of rigid insulation.
It's not called a dog addict.
I don't know.
Addict.
I like that name.
Oh, I thought I saw that somewhere.
I think that should catch on. So build your dog attic. You put your air handler in there, and get on with your life.
What about the ducts, though?
You got to seal the ducts
Seal them
with mastic. I hate mastic. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
I don't like the mess of it. I find myself like you're supposed to wear nitrile gloves, but they get sliced to ribbons on the razor sharp seams of ductwork.
That sounds fun.
It's awful, right? And in installed ductwork, it's very rare to get to all sides of it, right? I like butyl tape, duct seal tape. It's not duct tape. It's duct sealing tape. And it's got a much thicker adhesive, and it doesn't dry out like normal duct tape. And I think it's less messy, and I hate it less. But it's still hard to wrap, especially sheet metal rectangular duct that's tight to walls on all sides. You can't do it.
Do you think condensation is really not a problem if he's got that kind of duct that's not insulated?
I do think it's a problem because Matt's suggesting it's not a problem because the flex duct itself is insulated, so it's presumably going to be much warmer, and you have less likelihood of condensation.
Yeah.
The risk is when you have metal ductwork in insulation and it can get ambient air in contact, it's going to condense on there. So that's not a problem with the flex duct, or it's not likely a problem. But the metal boots that are at the end of every ductwork is potentially a problem. So you're going to have to spray foam those or cut and cobble insulation around those to insulate those things so they don't become a condensing surface. Even in Bend, Oregon, which is really dry in the summertime, I think there's a potential. And one of the things that I also learned on GBA when I dug into this comes from Craig Dumheller, who's a senior energy researcher at the Home Innovation Research Lab in Upper Marlboro, Maryland, points out that contracts who are casual about exposed metal on register boots may be in for a surprise. With buried ducts, which is what we're suggesting, seal up the ducts, put them in a thick layer of blown-in fiber insulation, either fiberglass or cellulose, is that what happens is when you do that is you've now kept the air much cooler during cooling season, right? Because now the ducts aren't giving up all their heat to the attic, or all their cooling to the attic, or taking on heat more accurately. And those metal boots are more likely to condense because the air moving through them is colder. 7 degrees on average when you bury the ducts, which is a huge difference, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about perhaps 50 degree versus 40 degree air temperature, or 50 or 40, you know what I'm saying? Like, so
Yeah.
it's a big difference. So you need to insulate those if you're going to do this.
Yeah. The energy code, I think the 2018 energy code does have some like prescriptive measures for burying ducts and insulation. I can't tell you all the particulars, but I think in your zone, I think the ducts themselves have to be
R8, right?
R8, and
yeah.
then they have to be buried in insulation, R19 below, R19 above.
It's obviously easier to do buried ducts in a house with a truss roof. We didn't hear from this listener how their house is built, but the reason is because ceiling joists are going to be at least 2x8. Commonly, they could be 2x10 or 2x12, depending on the span. And so that means the duct is running on top of the joist in many cases. That means you need much more insulation than a duct that's running over a 2x4 bottom cord and a roof truss, right? So it's complicating when you have conventional framing and not trusses.
Mine only has 2x6. Ceiling
Yeah, me
joists.
too.
Yeah.
I think our houses are unusual.
Right.
And
Well,
perhaps underbuilt.
yeah, probably.
My house is definitely underbuilt.
Yeah.
What else do we want to say about that?
We're going to run through Paul's plan.
Let's go through Paul's plan, and then we'll jump all over that. Okay. 1. Create duct plan. Make sure they run optimally. No big sags, turns, must be taut, etc. So that's a great start, right? You want your ducts to have nice, smooth curves. You especially want that inner lighter to be pulled tight to whatever it's connecting to, because when you have that's not pulled tight, you have a way more resistance, air resistance, static pressure.
This is his crawl space plan. By the way that you're looking at.
Am I missing something?
Yeah, he has a 6-point plan for. I think the attic.
Oh yeah, we got the 8-point attic. Okay.
Yeah.
So 1, determine a plan on the ducts in the attic. Shorten them, redirect them, or drop them to the attic floor as needed. Seal all ducts with mastic, fiberglass tape, nylon fasteners, and possibly HVAC metal tape as necessary. Air seal the entire attic with great stuff, foam board for chases, etc. Yes, look for those thermal bypasses. One of the other things that's interesting about attic ductwork is, since return air systems are often undersized for the air handler and the system, they lead to increased exfiltration because the attic ends up pulling additional air from the living space because of it's depressurized. And so attic ductwork makes the house leakier than it would be otherwise under natural pressure. So you got to fix all this stuff. Add insulation. Use leaf blower to clear insulation off of soffits.
Yeah,
that's gonna be fun.
I think he's dreaming there. I mean, it's not like a gun, like pointing a leaf blower at something. That air goes all over the place.
It's gonna make a colossal mess at a minimum.
But I hope he takes video. Send it in.
Yeah, I'll see that.
Yeah.
Add insulation throughout attic. Use cellulose blown in and/or unfaced bats. I think that blow-in insulation is far superior to bats. It's easier to install in an attic, especially with stuff all around. Like, just it's easy.
Yeah.
It's a great DIY project. Put thermostat with remote in attic to monitor air temperature and determine if I want to add gable vents. Don't do that. Attic air temperature is impossible to control with ventilation. We've talked about it on the podcast before. Research has shown. So don't do that. Just get the stuff tightened up in the attic, both the ceiling, diaphragm, the ductwork. If you can, move the air handler down. If not, do your best to seal that up. Replace the square plastic roof vents. I don't know why. Once again, roof ventilation does not affect the air temperature up in the attic, so your cooling system is not going to benefit from that. Insulate all 3 attic hatches with 4 2-inch layers of foam board and weather stripping. Also a good thing to do for a DIYer, the amount of air leakage through normal attic hatches is alarming. Do you have an attic hatch?
No, I don't have an attic.
That's good.
Thanks for asking.
We put the attic hatch in Liam's room because it's really uncomfortable, and he runs kind of hot, so it's okay.
Yeah.
Crawl space. Okay. Create a duct plan. Make sure they're running optimally. No big sags, turns, must be taut, etc. Steel ducts with mastic like an attic. Air seal the entire subfloor. This guy doesn't need us. He gets the thing. Check insulation for needed repair. Fix vapor barrier with 6 mil vapor barrier where needed. Fix floor squeaks. So I'm a little confused. Who is this guy? Is this Aaron?
Somebody.
Paul.
Yeah.
Paul, you're going to want, I don't know whether the vapor retarder is on the ground or if it's on the underside of the floor system. It's really better to have it on the floor or on the ground instead of the floor. But if you move it to the floor, you're suddenly changing where the thermal envelope is and it gets more complicated. You should have a more rigid air barrier on the bottom of the insulation if you want to keep the insulation in the floor system. If you want to move the insulation to the walls, which is often a good idea, you have to seal up the ventilation vents on the crawl space foundation and treat it like a little tiny basement with insulated walls, vapor barrier on the floor. You can pull out the fiberglass in the crawl space floor system, and it'll be full of mouse turds. So wear a respirator.
Yeah. If you want information on that, refer to episodes 1 through 186.
It's true.
Do you ever put a vapor barrier jacket on the duct itself? Is there such a thing?
Yeah. So the flex duct he speaks of has a plastic
it's built
coating
into
on
it.
it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's got plastic liner on the inside. It's actually this kind of metallic plastic wrapped around a big slinky, fiberglass insulation, and then a plastic jacket around the whole thing. So I went to look for the heating degree days, which is a good conversation to have in any of these conversations. This is a measurement of how much heat you need to make your house 65 degrees. And if you're interested in the intricacies of heating degree days, how they're measured, you can look that up yourself. I'll put a link on the podcast page, but it's a little ancillary to the conversation here. But just for comparison, Bend has a climate much like where we are in southern New England. It has approaching 7,000 heating degree days. We have 6,100. For comparison, Washington, D.C. is 4,900. Going further south, Charleston, South Carolina really starts to drop off at 1,663. If you get to Miami, 175 heating degree days, which means that you only need to raise the temperature a little bit, a few days a year to get to 65 degrees.
Yeah.
But their cooling degree days is going to be off the charts, right? For comparison, if you're going to more northern places, Green Bay, Wisconsin, which is kind of the coldest place I could think of in the continental U.S., is 8,000. That's very much like where I lived in northern Vermont, similar. If you want to go to someplace really cold, though, Barrow, Alaska took the cake for heating degree days with 20,370. If you're not familiar with where Barrow, Alaska is, it's on the north slope of Alaska. It's in the Arctic Circle. Easily. Yeah. It's on the Arctic Ocean, right?
Yeah, it's way up there.
Yeah.
I haven't been there.
There's an Inupiat name for it, too, and I would tell you that, but I could not pronounce it. For the So, there you have it. You guys have anything to add to this discussion?
No.
How about you, Kiley?
Sound exhausted.
He's exhausted because it's why put that duct in that? But this guy can't do anything about it. His house was built in the 80s. I'm sure that was it's still normal everywhere.
Yep.
In the South.
In the South, that's...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they don't have basements.
Yeah.
And people talk about putting, ranch houses in the South often have a central hallway that goes the length of the house. And they say lower the ceiling, put the trunk line in there, branch off to the other ducts. Looks really easy on a drawing, but try and convince an HVAC guy who's been putting air handlers and ductwork in the attic for decades that's a good idea, and you're not going to get any buy-in.
Yeah.
And you have to put an air barrier above the ductwork before you install it. So that's out of the sequence of the normal construction process. So I know why people do it, but you shouldn't. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today.
Wait, don't you want to make mention of the Duct Dynasty link there? You kind of missed
Sorry.
all that.
Go ahead.
No, just that it gets into depth as to why you shouldn't do it, and it's just really informative.
So you like that link?
I did like that link.
So we'll put that on the podcast page. It comes from buildingscience.com, which is Joe Steebrook's company, and it talks a little bit about the history of burying ducts and why you shouldn't put your ductwork in the attic. It's good stuff, like everything they do. Mm-hmm. And I put a little link on there for what's the difference duct tape between butyl tape that I'm talking about and what everyone describes as duct tape. All right. Are we done
Proceed.
now? I'm glad you're on this show. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Kiley, Matt, and Jeff for joining me. And thank you all for listening. I really mean that. We love it. And I think probably the best part of this, doing this, is for hearing from you all. So please send us your correspondence via email or put it on the podcast comments. And remember to send us your questions and comments to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us. However you're listening, it helps other folks find our podcast. Happy building. Thanks for listening.